Welcome to the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Today, I am so excited to be sitting down with Victoria Song, who is a CEO coach to billion-dollar companies. Victoria works with billion-dollar company CEOs such as George Ruan of Honey, tech founders like Peter Rive, CTO of SolarCity, and celebrities like the one and only Cindy Crawford. She's the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Bending Reality: How to Make the Impossible Probable, a Forbes 30 Under 30 venture capitalist, Yale University and Harvard Business School alumna. Victoria has helped her clients achieve multi-billion, that's billion with a B, dollar exits. Today, Victoria and I sat down and talked about so many things. We talked about what bending reality is and how you can make the improbable likely. We talked about how bending reality can relate to different areas of our lives and work, including money, love, and our bodies. And we talked about feminine leadership and how Victoria defines it, what she's doing to accelerate it, and our shared vision for a better future for all of us. I just know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Victoria as much as I did. Victoria, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Liz. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh my goodness, it's absolutely my pleasure. I feel like you've been on my dream podcast guest list for a while, ever since I feel like before we started working together. And it's so exciting to get to share your magic with our listeners. Before we jump in, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself to folks?
Yeah, so I am an executive coach and I work with both men and women. I started my career working with a lot of entrepreneurs, and since releasing my book, Bending Reality, I've gotten to expand that to really helping all high achievers who are obsessed with growth and who want to find their next edge and really collapse time around what they want to make come true. So my tagline is how to make the impossible probable. So that's what we do with my clients. And I've been so lucky and grateful to get to do that with you too, Liz. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. And before that, I was a venture capitalist. So I used to invest in tech startups.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, definitely want to talk about bending reality and what it is and how we do it. And of course, your book as well. But maybe before we get into that, I will say something I love doing on the podcast is giving people a chance to tell the slightly longer version of their stories or how they came to be doing the very cool world-changing thing that they're doing today. So I'm curious, would you mind telling us just a little bit of your journey of how you came to be a CEO coach to billion-dollar companies?
Yes. I mean, there's so many things I could share, but I would say one of the first things that's probably influential is I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So my parents are entrepreneurs. They started a company together. I think I've always just been living and breathing startups, even if it meant going to the office and helping with mailing mail and putting stamps on envelopes and just kind of anything after school. And I was just always around all their conversations and hearing all their strategy sessions at the dinner table. So I think I've just been immersed in it since I can remember. And then separately, personally, my dream, when you're a kid, not a kid, but a teenager, was I want to go be a powerful CEO of a big bank, was sort of my thought at the time. I was oh, there's not enough women on Wall Street. I want to be a powerful female CEO of one of these big, important companies. And as I started moving into finance and worked at Goldman Sachs, and then I started working in venture capital, I just started to feel wow, it's not really designed in the kind of feminine leadership that I personally naturally embody and also am inspired by. And in a way felt I was hitting walls trying to succeed and rise in the ranks in the financial industry. And so then kind of my own experience of like hitting walls and then also working with founders, both men and women again, and sort of learning that the things that were stopping people from being successful were not the obvious missing some secret strategy or tactic or game playbook. It was more like, oh, you're really struggling with imposter syndrome and you have a lot of self-doubt and you have a lot of fear coming up and your nervous system seems to be accustomed to a level of stress and anxiety that keeps you going, over functioning. So you're burning out. And so essentially like all of these, what we call maybe softer skills and challenges were really what was in the way of breaking through, being successful and rising the ranks in these industries. And so I left venture capital realizing like if I want to help unlock founders, I can do that much more impactfully from the capacity of being a coach, where I can really work on them holistically from the inside out, looking at like, again, their fears, how they walk with the unknown, uncertainty. And when we can master those things, those felt like the greater needle movers compared to like their business model or, something that felt like it's just a number on a piece of paper was really not going to be the needle mover for them. So yeah, that's what I've been doing since.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool to hear. And that feels so aligned actually with my experience. I feel like similarly working like in sustainability and social impact, I was just struck time and time again by the fact that so often kind of how far along an organization was in advancing good in the world came down to the person at the helm of these programs. And that I'm such a big believer too, like the inner work is what enables the outer work and the outer transformation. So that's so interesting to hear. You had a similar path to, oh, this is actually how I'm meant to make the change that I want to see in the world.
Exactly.
Well, I'd love to talk more about bending reality, which I know is the name of your book and is such a fun concept. So maybe before we get into talking about how to do it and why to do it, for anyone who's not familiar, let's maybe start with like, what is bending reality? Like when we say that term or use that phrase, what do you mean?
I believe that we are always bending our reality. It's just if we're not conscious to how we're doing it, we're probably bending our reality out of our favor. And what that means is that if we hold, and I talk about contraction versus expansion, but if we hold our worldview in this really contractive way, meaning that I am afraid of things and I focus on what I don't want, and I'm always trying to avoid the career that I don't want and the situation that I don't want, and we're sort of just moving away from contraction in our life, then we are actually bending the odds out of our favor. And I teach in the book about how it looks to actually hold this more expansive lens, because when you're consciously, intentionally cultivating this energy of expansion, all of a sudden you find like you're experiencing synchronicity and you're in the right place at the right time. And you're holding this frequency of joy and gratitude and aliveness, and you have this life force energy that flows through you. And that's really, I believe, the source of all joy and happiness, is being able to have that life force energy move through you. But as you know, for so many of us have reasons from hurts and pains and disappointments from the past that are keeping us blocked and energetically not able to experience that fullness and the life force of what's possible for us.
Totally. Well, and I feel like you did such a great job in your book of really synthesizing like so much of what I've like also learned in different healing and coaching containers. I'm curious, how did you get this idea that at the end of the day, so much of what so many amazing teachers and healers, that so much of it comes back to this idea of how we stay in an expansive versus contractive state?
So I have 10 journals and diaries of just like notes from my own writing to myself, but also like everything I've ever consumed, from books to retreats to workshops to coaches. And so I've constantly had this chart, and I could probably find in one of my journals, that would just say like, what are all the common themes that I was witnessing? So I was sort of like a scientist, just keeping track of, okay, I studied a new coach. Now, what would I say is their methodology, and what are the common themes and the fundamental kind of principles, and how does that fit into this framework that I'm developing of like, what is everybody sort of saying in different ways? And by the time I had this download to write Bending Reality, it just became super crystal clear. Oh, it really is these things repeated over and over in different modalities, from yoga teachers to life coaches to business coaches to sex coaches. Like everybody in their own way was saying the same thing over and over again. And so I think it just became crystal clear from just studying and journaling and keeping track of the themes that were coming up for me.
That's so cool. Well, and I feel like knowing a little bit of the story of how you wrote your book, I feel like that's like really wild and inspiring. So I'm curious if you don't mind sharing even how the book kind of came to you and came to be and what that process looked like.
I was in the middle of the pandemic, like so many of us, and I was consciously consuming materials and just trying to like absorb content that I felt like was enriching me versus sort of just like binge watching Netflix or watching the news. And I think from that period of just like going deeply inward into that self reflective period, connecting to source, as we would call it, like our divinity within, I was able to start to feel that sensation of like downloading and channeling. And the sensation I had specifically was that as I slept, I was receiving information and sort of calibrating like a tuning fork to a concept, but I was calibrating to it in a way that was not just intellectual, but also feeling. So there was like a feeling quality to the calibration. So as I slept, I was like receiving what I perceived as downloads. And then I'd wake up and then write 5 hours a day. And I did this for basically 5 days. And so I was able to write Bending Reality in a week. And it really felt like it came through and wrote me. If I tried to write a book, I think it would have taken me a lot longer.
That's so wild. Do you feel like, was it something where like when you initially, like on day one of like waking up from those downloads, were you like, oh my gosh, a book is here? Or like, what did that feel like?
It felt more like, no, I didn't know it was a book. I just knew that I had to write every concept down that was coming to me. And what it really felt like was it felt like I had this antenna that I was able to connect to some internet, except the internet wasn't like Googling. It was more like a collective consciousness and unconsciousness. And I could ask any question and then instantaneously receive an answer. So I felt like I was more like trying to keep up with all the answers I was getting and just trying to type it all out.
Oh, how cool. That makes me think of Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert and like this idea that these ideas kind of come visit us. If we're the person in the moment who's ready, we get to keep it kind of thing.
Yes, I don't think we create thoughts, we receive them. So absolutely. I really don't think like I created any of the thoughts or ideas in Bending Reality. It was more like I was super willing messenger to receive it and transcribe it.
That's so cool. Let's talk a little bit more about how you bend reality for people who are listening who are like, I want to make the seemingly impossible probable or likely. Where would you say someone should get started?
One of the basic frameworks that that I talk about in chapter 1 is just this idea of we could do this even right now as we sit here, but just like tuning in to the last 7 days and just feeling an event that didn't go the way we wanted it to. And actually like feeling what that creates in the body. And, chances are like, Liz, if I ask you to think of this, what do you notice happening for you in your somatic level when you think into this person or event?
Well, like the feeling that comes up for me when I think about it is frustration.
Yeah. Yeah. Frustration. And when you feel frustrated, do you notice, is that in the chest? Is that in the belly? Where do you notice sensation wise?
Totally. It's like, for me, it's usually a tightness in my chest. And that's what I'm noticing right now.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So this is a state that I feel like a lot of us unconsciously operate from, right? It's like this tightness, this shallow breathing, this feeling of like, ooh, not that, or it didn't go the way I wanted it to. How do I do that? I'm afraid. Is it going to work? Right. So all of those questions, any doubts, any limiting beliefs, they create that sensation and contraction in the body. And then now if I were to ask you, okay, let's let that go on your next breath. And then on your inhale, I want you to think of an event situation that went the way you wanted it to, or even better than you thought.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you notice? How do you feel?
Like I notice I immediately, like my shoulders are like back, my chest is open, like my heart feels open. I feel like more of an alive, buzzing sensation.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so this is the state that I talk about. It is expansion. And this is the state that we access when we feel this gratitude and excitement and joy and trust and surrender and all of the things that we want more of in our life exist in this energy state of expansion. And so if you want to bend your reality, the first code is to identify where are you currently? Like, do you feel contracted or do you feel expansive in this very moment? And I say in the book that I love this question because you actually don't need a biometric device to know. You don't have to be like wearing something to read it and be like, what's my HRV? You actually just ask yourself like, oh, what do I feel right now? Oh, I feel expansive or I feel contracted. And that's going to instantaneously help you learn, okay, where do I need to course correct? What can I do to move through the contraction and get back into expansion? Because when we're in that expansive place, that's when we bend the odds in our favor.
Totally. I love that because it's so simple and it's something that like moment to moment, as you said, we can tune into. We don't need anything except ourselves and that noticing.
Yes.
What would you recommend if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I am checking in. I notice that I am currently in a state of contraction and I want to get to a place of expansion. What are some of the, I'm like, I know some of the answers to this, but like, what would you say are like some of the ways that someone who's like feeling contracted and like doesn't want to stay there can shift that state?
Yeah. So this is a really good question and nuanced because generally speaking, throughout the book, I talk about how you want to be optimizing the activities that put you into that state of expansion. So listing out your activities that feel like a 10 for you. So whether that's singing or dancing or painting or cooking, like really starting to stack those activities that put you into that expansive state so that that becomes more and more your baseline throughout a day. However, the nuanced part of this question is that you don't actually want to resist or avoid feeling contraction because expansion is actually the ability to be with whatever arises. So for those of us listening who've heard or who've experienced a good cry, for instance, as soon as you actually let yourself go there and surprise yourself and maybe spontaneously cry, you actually feel really amazing after. It's because you had that huge release because you allowed that energy pattern to move through you versus try to resist it because you're like, I don't want to feel sad right now. Right. So in general, I would say like one of the most common questions I get from clients is, okay, I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel disappointed. Now, what tool can I reach for to stop feeling this way? And usually that's an indication to me of like, oh, wait, hold on. Anything you resist creates contraction in your body, right? And so if you're like, I don't want to feel this way, or oh, I don't want to feel sad or upset, or I don't want to spin on this situation anymore, like that resistance is actually creating the block, the energetic block. And what we're going for is not, I never want to feel sad or I never want to feel contraction. What we're actually going for is flow. I want to feel everything and let it all flow. And so when energy can flow in the body, it can flow in your life. And so what we're looking for is just where am I creating blocks and resistances and therefore creating energetic blocks in the form of not wanting to feel this contraction that makes me stuck actually in a mood, in a funk. And then now I'm feeling this way for days, weeks, and months because I'm still trying to not feel this way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things that I got from your book is this idea of it's not about skipping the contractive feelings. It's about like feeling to the bottom of them so that it creates space for new feelings to come in.
Yes. And you're like an A+ student. So you totally nailed it and totally got that. And you probably felt this way after the Alchemy Journey, but once you have let yourself go there enough times, don't you feel like your body is now like, okay, cool. Like we're going to go through it again. And that's fine. I don't make it a big deal anymore.
Yeah, I almost feel like something that's been shifting for me. And I'm like, this is still such a work in progress for me, for sure. My definite like preferred default emotional range is on like the higher end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I feel like,
Joy, ecstatic.
Totally. But I do feel like it's almost this weird new rewiring that if I am feeling like blah about something, I almost get excited because I'm like, okay, cool. I need to feel through this, but I know something really good is coming on the other side of it. So it allows me to like go there and trust that nothing stays the same, right? So knowing that you're going in and it will inevitably change.
Yeah, ideally, like we have a fast emotional metabolism, which is what I call it in the book. And specifically, like we allow everything almost like the ocean, just like they're just ocean waves. Don't get attached to any single one of them, or think of it as like a weather pattern where it rains and then the sun comes out in 15 minutes. But if we're like, oh no, I don't want to feel this way, and now I'm spiraling down because I'm resisting it, and now I'm in a weird funk, and now I'm depressed, and it's like, well, it's because there's a part of you that feels like you're making it wrong. that you're not supposed to feel this way and I shouldn't feel this way, or I don't know why I feel this way, or how do I make myself stop feeling this way? And all of that is actually prolonging, because what you resist persists.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm curious because I know that you've like taken these concepts and you've applied them to so many different aspects of life. And so I also would love to talk about what some of these tools and practices like can look like in different aspects of life. So I know like one of the ones that given like your client like profile, I imagine a lot of people come to you to work on things related to like career, wealth, success. And so I'm curious, like when you think about bending reality as it relates to those 10th house in astrology areas of life, what are some of the tools or concepts or ways that you apply this most often, like to those specific areas?
Yeah, so now that you have this framework of contraction versus expansion, you can start to map it, like you said, to every area of life. So if we took money, for instance, and I asked you, well, what are all the contractive thoughts one could have around money? Well, you'd be like, well, scarcity, lack, there's never enough. I have to do a job I hate because that's what it takes to make money. It's like, oh, well, those are all thoughts that are very limiting that create contraction when I feel into them. I don't like them, but some part of me subconsciously thinks it's true. So that's what's limiting my reality. If it creates a contraction in your body, a limit in your body, then it is certainly creating a limit in your reality. Similarly, if I asked you, like, what are the contractive feelings one might have around money? You're like, well, I might feel shame because I don't really trust myself. I feel shame that I overspend. I feel shame that I unconsciously spend. I feel shame that I'm not making enough. I feel shame about my worthiness and my value, so I'm not asking for enough. Okay, well, that's obviously a very contractive emotion that a lot of us might feel around money. You might also feel like a fear around money, is like, no matter how much I have, it feels like, depending on my circumstance growing up, I'm worried it could all go away tomorrow, or I have to constantly save up for a rainy day. So there's, again, fear we can feel around money. And then finally, like the actions that we could be taking around contraction when it comes to money would be like, I'm hoarding things, or even though I make a ton of money, I never spend it. So it almost feels like I feel poor, even though technically I have a big number in my bank account. And as I'm saying this, all you can feel how heavy and contractive all of these thoughts, feelings, and actions are. And as I describe someone who has these thoughts, has these feelings, and takes these actions around money, and I asked you, what do you think their financial reality is? You'd probably all say, like, oh, that person probably is struggling financially or feeling financially insecure. And yes, because the reality is just a reflection of these thoughts, feelings, and actions that are all from this contractive energy when it comes to money. And then on the flip side of that, if we were like, okay, well, how could you have expansive thoughts around money? And you might be, again, like depending on your relationship to money, this might sound a little too rainbows and unicorns, but some beliefs that I and my clients have are like, the more fun I have, the more money I make. And it's like, wow, that feels so good. That feels amazing, right? Or money comes to me in all ways, always. Like, ooh, I love that, being a magnet for money. So these are expansive thoughts when it comes to money. And then similarly, if I asked you, what are some expansive emotions that you might have with regards to money? You might say, well, I feel really grateful for what I have. I feel there's more coming and I already have enough as is, right? So focusing on what you have versus the lack. Similarly, you might be like, I'm so excited. I'm excited about the future because I have a feeling that more is coming, right? So you can feel these expansive emotions around money. And then lastly, the actions you might be taking that are expansive would be things like, I am asking for what I feel like I'm worth. I am speaking up and going after the opportunities and playing big. I'm actually leaving my safe, financially secure job to go be an entrepreneur and be bold and be brave because I'm so excited about the vision I have, right? So you're going to be braver, more courageous. You're going to be more grateful and excited about life. So if I asked you, like, what do you think the financial reality is or will be of this latter person who has these expansive thoughts and feelings and actions around money? You probably would say, well, that person sounds like they're set up for a multimillionaire in the making. This person is a billionaire from the inside out. Like, it's just a matter of time. It's inevitable, right? So this is what I mean. I love kind of grounding it in a very tangible example because now you can see like just that shift of like, am I coming from this contractively or expansively will create a completely different trajectory, completely different reality. And that's what it looks like to, again, bend our reality toward what we want, right? Versus bend the odds out of our favor because we're having all these contractive thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Yeah, I love that. It's so concrete. And I feel like that example really resonates. I know I have told so many people, I feel like, especially in the last couple of weeks, like Some of the most important work I think I did when I was starting my business was work on my money mindset, because it's wild, because I feel like having gotten to work with so many like amazing women and impact leaders, the way that we feel about money specifically almost often has like so little to do with the numbers in our bank account. And it like is so much stronger a predictor of our feeling of safety, of our feeling of optimism, of our willingness to take risks. The feelings like really can and do, I think, shape our reality, especially when it comes to money.
I completely agree with you. I feel like any entrepreneur, any salesperson, anyone who's responsible for generating revenue needs to read money books, needs to clean up all their money beliefs.
Totally. I know for me, when I first got started with some of this work, I almost was like, okay, am I being like delusional? But really, it's wild how like I have found in so many cases, like what I believe becomes my reality, especially.
Yes. With everything, with love, with creating children, right? With financial abundance. Everything is based on what you think is possible, what you think is normal.
I am interrupting this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast really quickly to personally invite you to join the Girls Club Collective. Our doors only open 4 times a year, so don't miss your chance. The Girls Club Collective is an intentionally intimate feminine leadership lab for change agents and the personal and professional development community that you've been looking for. Don't just take my word for it, though. While you're submitting your application on our website, girlsclubcollective.co, please be sure to read one of the countless testimonials from our incredible members and alumni. There are so many benefits to being a part of the collective, which is designed around our signature feminine leadership framework. That means you'll have opportunities every month for connection, embodied strategy, visibility, and amplification, and so much more. You'll also get a chance to learn from leaders like Victoria, who will be leading a guest expert session this summer on magic, miracles, and mid-year momentum. Applications are due June 1st, and the collective's doors won't be open again until September. Don't forget to mention our podcast in the Where Did You Hear About the Cohort section on your application. And now, without further ado, back to the episode. Well, I know you've done some like really cool and interesting work with this concept as it relates to our bodies as well, which like I know is like kind of a recent journey and unlock for you. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your experience bending reality, like as it relates to our physical bodies.
Absolutely. And yes, this is one of the most magical places where, again, it feels like, wow, it's so tangible. Like I can actually release weight based on my thought alone. Now that's crazy, right? Like something to be so physical and tangible that you can see the results on a scale. So I was able to release over 20 pounds in 2 months. And it wasn't because I was trying to, again, because if I were actively like, I'm trying to do this, that would be like gripping and contracted, right? So really the thinking was like, oh, I'm getting married in 12 months. Let's get wedding ready. Let's drop 10 pounds, 7 pounds or something like that. And I was giving myself like 12 months to do it. And then as soon as I started doing the healing work, the rewiring on a subconscious level of the beliefs that I had toward myself and my body, it just happened in 2 months, over 20 pounds, more weight than I was thinking or planning to release, way faster than I had anticipated. And some of the thoughts and beliefs that I realized I used to have around my body was I felt like no matter how much I ever weighed, I never felt good in my own skin. There was some like worthiness wounds and shame and the sense of like, I'm not the way I'm supposed to look. And also specifically, I had some fear of visibility. So some sense of if I'm too successful, too attractive, too XYZ, I would be targeted and taken down. Like it's not safe to be seen. It's not safe to be visible. It's not safe to be successful. And so I had all of these weird subconscious programming that was essentially telling me like, it's not safe to have it all, essentially. Like I would trigger people wouldn't be happy for me. The only thing that people will be happy for is that they saw that it took a lot of struggle and sacrifice and blood, sweat, and tears. Then I would feel worthy of whatever the exercise body of my dreams or the success or the financial abundance or the love of my life, whatever it is. But it always felt like, unless there was a pain story attached to it, I didn't think I deserved it or that people would be happy for me And it felt like it was going to almost like lose love if I shined, essentially. So these are just some examples of some of the subconscious excavation that I did to uncover these contractive thoughts that I had around my safe to be seen, my safe to feel thin and be in a body that I actually love and that I enjoy. I noticed I liked to wear sweaters and layers and like wasn't comfortable with summer clothing. Like I preferred jackets and layers and fall and winter clothing. But there was all this interesting subconscious programming. And then obviously the way we relate to food, right? Where at the time I thought food was a comfort and a place that made me feel like, oh, I enjoy food. I'm a food connoisseur. Like I love going to restaurants all around the world. And so food was more like a time to feel connection, a time to feel adventure. I was almost like associating food too much with a sense of my joyful activity of the day. It was like the moment I got to bond with my partner over food. And so anyway, there were all these interesting connections that I made through this 2-month process that once I cleared out and rewired, it was again instantaneous. It was, oh wow, like I could love the way I look. I could feel so good in my own skin. I can look in the mirror and feel beautiful. And I started to say things to myself like, the kinder I am to my body, the more I release weight effortlessly, or the safer I feel to shine. And it just started to feel like all of my new affirmations, new subconscious programming and techniques that I take people through in my Bending Reality Body program, I'm taking people exactly through the excavation and rewiring that I did that allowed this quantum leap in my body, my figure. Like I'm truly like in a better shape I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm 36 today. And I think I look way better than I did when I was 16, 18, 21, even though I was maybe technically on a scale like a few pounds lighter than I am today. I feel like I've never looked better. And I think the main difference, especially as a woman, is being able to say that I actually love the way I look and I love the way I feel in my own skin. And that, you know, I don't look in the mirror anymore and focus on like what I wish I could change. And this was all, again, part of that subconscious reprogramming.
It's so cool and it's so inspiring. I'm curious what I'm hearing from you as like a starting place for anyone who's listening. And I know that it like probably requires a little bit of like suspension of disbelief. And it's also like, I don't know, right? Like, like I've seen it with my own eyes.
I really believe that the more analytical you are, the harder and less suggestible you are. And think about it, like when you're super analytical trying to figure it out, you can feel the contraction that that creates in your being versus when you trust and you're suggestible, you feel very expansive, you know? So this work can be extra challenging. And I do have a lot of left brain humans in my world, you know, but the book is the best place to start if you feel skeptical.
And also what I'm hearing you share too is so much of this starts with noticing the thoughts that we're having and the soundtrack in our brain that's not us and it's not ours. We're the person who like that voice is talking to. We're not the voice.
Exactly. Because every thought that we have then creates a feeling vibrationally in the body, right? So that's why we want to be really mindful, especially of the thoughts that are creating any feeling to them, right? Some thoughts are neutral, like I'm going to have Italian dressing with that. And that's like a very neutral thought. But the thoughts that actually create contraction in the body, we want to pay attention to.
Totally. There's so much I want to talk to you about still, but maybe before we move on from like bending reality, I know that love is another area like where you're really passionate about and have like experienced for yourself and help your clients experience like wild shifts and quantum leaps in their reality and your reality. So I would love to hear a little bit more from you in your own words, like how this like can apply or be applied in our love lives.
Yes, it's such a good question. So that's actually my newest course coming out is Bending Reality Love, How to Attract, Create, and Cultivate Epic Love and Partnership. And what I have found, looking at, again, some of these thoughts and beliefs, like we tend to attract what we think we are worthy of and also what we find familiar. So if we growing up felt like unimportant, I don't matter, I'm all alone in this world, I take up less space because I don't want to be demanding. I'm going to be the opposite of high maintenance. I'm going to be like the cool girl who doesn't need anything. I'm super independent. Then we actually attract someone who's like not very willing to be emotionally that there for us. And also, you know, that's kind of the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is we attract someone who's actually toxic and unhealthy and mistreats us and talks down to us and makes us feel unworthy, right? And so many of us, unfortunately, can probably attest to that relationship or that person we dated who really like made us feel smaller. And maybe over time we realized like the fact that I even allowed this or even was a match to this speaks to how I must feel deep down inside is truly what I'm worth or what I think about myself. And so I feel like relationship work is truly like part of the human experience, like why we're all here on the planet is at some point to learn how to love and be loved and how to connect to another human being in an intimate partnership. And so in some ways, like even though we all have different job visions and wealth dreams, like we can all probably agree that at some point, each and every one of us hopes that us and all the people we love find someone that we want to be in some form of a loving relationship and partnership with. So to me, it's the place that we can't hide our shadows. We cannot hide the work that we have to do essentially. Because I, as an overachiever, felt like I was able to still have this amazing life and look great on paper and have this exceptional resume. But the fact that I didn't work through all this stuff that I needed to heal was showing up blatantly in my romantic partnership. And so to me, that's why we see people like Elon Musk or even when Steve Jobs was alive, like these visionaries, these most brilliant humans that we'll remember forever and have a legacy of their own, they are probably going to struggle in their marriages and their romantic partnerships and intimacy and family and creating that kind of pro-relational relationship with people because again, like you can hide your wounds in a lot of other places in life, but relationships are one of the only places I think you cannot hide what you have not healed.
Oh my goodness. Yes. That feels so true to me. I feel like at least in my own like healing journey, the right partner for me who like makes me feel the way I want to feel, who loves me the way I want to be loved, who like is just, totally the person I've been calling in for so long, I feel like was the last thing to show up of all the things.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so you're a high achieving woman. I mean, I think we could all raise our hand and be like, do we all have a friend or a best friend who's like super badass, high achieving, but we know she struggles to find love and dating? Yeah. I mean, that's most commonly the story.
Totally. And I think just thinking back to my 2019, 2020 self was like, it was so frustrating to be like, I'm doing all the things. I'm doing all the things that it wasn't until I became a match for the kind of partnership that I wanted and was ready to actually say no to everything that was not that.
Yes.
Then it happened.
Totally. I've been thinking about this because even though people hire me for career and wealth and success, they end up spending the most time trying to talk to me about dating, especially those who aren't in relationship. And I started to conclude this week that kind of the first stage of being a match, as you call it, Liz, to epic love is to first just filter out all the bullshit relationships, right? So the moment you're no longer tolerating anyone who makes you feel small or makes you feel less than or does anything physically, emotionally, psychologically that's a little bit sneaky, but that's contractive, when you can realize that you deserve better than that and you hold your standards and you hold your boundaries and you don't deserve treatment like that, that's like step one to being a match. And then after you no longer date people like that, you have to then date kind of what I call a neutral category of people, which is like, they're not abusive, they're not unhealthy, they're not toxic, there's really nothing wrong with them, but you're just not as excited as you know you could be and that you want to be about whoever you're going to be with for the rest of your life. And so you can't even pinpoint exactly, maybe like they check off all the boxes, they look it on their resume, your family even likes them. But if you're really honest with yourself, if you really search deep down, you're like, I don't think this is it. Like I wouldn't be satisfied if I chose this person for the rest of my life. And this is where I think this is when you're really the second stage of being a match is when you realize, oh, I can say no to this. I can even say no to this, And then when you even say no to the thing that you feel like you have no rational reason to say no to, and maybe your parents are getting nervous for you because you're just like, really, what was wrong with him? He seemed or she seemed great, right? Now you're like, okay, now I'm a match for what I'm really calling in. And of course, like you can't just assume that it hasn't ever worked out because you just haven't found the right person. Like hopefully you're someone who's also doing the work on yourself, because that's what I would also say is my husband and I, we were not great partners before we were partners to each other. And we really had to learn how to be intimate and emotionally available and heal our insecure attachment styles. I used to be insecurely attached. He was avoidantly attached. Like we had to work on that no matter who we ended up with. And I think that sometimes we can assume it hasn't worked because the other person, we just haven't found the right person. But in my experience, it's like until I healed and did the inner work, I wouldn't have been the right person for anyone.
Totally. Oh, it's also interesting to hear. It's interesting to hear that that's like the number one thing that comes up in your coaching relationships too. I feel like love is just something where like if you want it and you don't have it, I feel like it is so all consuming.
Yes, for men and women. I think that we have this belief because of the story and culture that it's something that only women obsess about. But I promise you that more men take up more of our coaching time talking about relationships than the women I work with do.
Oh my goodness. That's actually like both surprising and so refreshing to hear.
Yes. I was shocked. I thought it was just one person, and then I started getting more of them, and I was like, okay, no, this is a theme.
That's so interesting. Well, I did want to make sure that we talk too about Alchemy Journey, speaking of like men and women and the things that come up. I know Alchemy Journey is one of your signature programs that I was lucky enough to be a part of in the past year. And it was incredible, amazing. I can't say enough good things about like what I got out of the experience. I'm curious for the uninitiated, if you had to like summarize what Alchemy Journey is for someone who's never heard of it, what is it and what inspired you to create this container?
Yeah, I loved having you in Alchemy. That was like the best. And so thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like, in short, alchemy is turning lead into gold. And a huge part of the whole journey of alchemy is how do we take everything from your past, present, and future that feels contractive, whether it was the childhood environment you grew up in, or any pains or traumas or disappointment, but we're alchemizing all of it into gold so that by the end of the alchemy journey, you truly embody this new knowing that everything you touch turns to gold. No matter what has ever happened to you or will happen to you, you will turn into gold. And that is the promise, the soul promise. And I say it's the fastest path to get from, where you are today to where you want to be in career, life, and love, because we heal whatever is in the way of that. Because I truly believe that the reason why my clients get these quantum results is because, again, we're not focused on like the 2x tactical change or like the 2x strategy or the business model. Like all of that's very linear 2x growth. I really focus on like, what is the biggest needle mover? What is the thing that is blocking you? What is the thing that's keeping you stuck? What is the story from your past that is still showing up in your life today that is actually keeping you small and afraid to be brave? When we unlock that, that's when like you just burst and like the sky's not the limit, and we're all surprised on what happens on the other side of that. And it's really like a dream that's beyond the current version of you's capability to dream. Like you start to see possibilities for yourself that you never even imagined for yourself before. But yeah, for you, Liz, like share some of what popped for you on the other side of healing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that drew me to the program and the experience, I think, and it's interesting because I spoke to someone who was thinking about joining not too long ago who had a similarly aligned but completely different like theme and reason that they were drawn to the program, equally valid. But I think for me, it was like self-trust and feeling like you hold yourself with like, it's just so clear that you so deeply trust yourself. And I was feeling like I was in a moment where I had gotten some like terrible business advice that I'd followed from people who like I thought knew better than me because they were like older than me or like whatever. And I just like made a couple like shifts in like my business, shifts in my life that I feel like I was like, what have I done? And like, how did I get here? And how did this happen? And I would say was like sort of how I was coming into the experience, was feeling like I did not trust myself with my business and with my work, which is like a really scary place to be in as a coach and as a community leader to be like,
Yeah, but it's so real because that is truly, I feel like one of the biggest things that people couldn't even articulate the way you just did is whether they trust themselves. It's not like someone's first thought of what's in their way.
like, I feel like it's so human, right? To like initially be thinking about the strategy, the like,
The education gap. Maybe I need to go to grad school.
yeah, totally. I need another piece of paper. Like the thing is in between me and my next level is a piece of paper. But no, I mean, so much of what came up for me in the experience and in my healing journey, like in the past year, was one, I mean, I do think there was like some inner child work that was like really powerful and important. And I think continues to be powerful and important for me to like really sit with and like reparenting myself, which just wasn't work that I had like, I feel like it was like came up at one point probably in the last like few years. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
And then it just like kept coming up. And I was like, no, no. I think so much of what we did too was like, I just like really reconnected with like all the proof and all the reasons why like I can, I should, I do fully trust myself, and like coming out the other side of the experience, including like our medicine ceremony, which was like so special and so impactful. Like it actually wasn't for me like rainbows and butterflies, like which I've had those experiences before. It was very much like, you know the answer. You know the answer. You've known the answer. You can keep coming back and looking for the answer, but you know it. And no one's going to give you like a graduation certificate that like you've completed your healing. Like that's not how it works.
Yes, exactly. That's so correct. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. So thank you for sharing that. The self-trust, I think, is the greatest high we can ever feel.
And it's interesting because it's like such a grounded high.
Yes, because it's not relying on anything outside of you.
Totally. And it was so wild to like get to have the experience. Like I'm obviously such a fan of and like love creating and holding containers for like women where we get to like witness and support each other. And I think something that's so cool about the way that you've structured the alchemy journey is it's so wild and cool and amazing and special to get to see other people go on their own journey like alongside you, and also get to be there to celebrate when they pop and have these like amazing moments and realizations, but also just to witness how we all are like getting what we need in the moment. And it can be so wildly different person to person.
Yes, that's so true. It really is the most beautiful thing that like are caught off guard with like, I thought I came in for this reason, but it was really this whole other thing, that I wasn't even aware of. And then for other people, yeah, it's like just so, so, so different, across the board. Some people are calling in love. Some people are calling in their next level of success. Some people they've had it all. They're so successful and they're just like, I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore, And so everyone's like really looking for something else. But at the end of the day, it's like, how do I sustain this feeling of just feeling really good and alive in my being, feeling self-trust, feeling whole, feeling complete, feeling grateful for my life, feeling that I feel good in my own skin, right? These are all really like inside out emotional states that if we learn to create them and cultivate them, we can create them whenever we want on the spot. And we no longer think it's this false illusion that it's because we haven't yet acquired XYZ circumstance externally that we don't yet feel the happiness we want to feel. And so I think that's one of the biggest breakthroughs in the alchemy journey is that everyone feels like not only did I get more than what I hoped for as far as my dreams, but also I now know how to feel the way I've always wanted to feel, kind of regardless of my situation. And no matter what life might throw at me in the future, I can't predict, but no matter what, I know I'm going to be okay. And I can still find my way back to magic and miracles, no matter what might happen in the future.
Absolutely, which is such an empowering feeling and such a magical place to be in. I'm like so curious for you facilitating this container. What has surprised you most or impacted you most in like holding the space of Alchemy Journey?
I feel that the thing that has surprised me the most that I still like remind myself is true is that there are certain things that I feel we can heal so much more deeply and so much more quickly while being witnessed, especially in this intimate sisterhood where we feel like, oh my gosh, like hearing you say that, I've never articulated that, but that's exactly how I feel. Or like, oh my gosh, like to see you move through that emotional process, it really unlocked that in me. And like, I felt healed just watching you heal. Right. And so we really do become each other's medicine. And in some ways, I feel like it's the best of both worlds because not only do you get what you came here for, but you end up getting everyone else's breakthroughs too. So whether or not you came in for love or starting childhood healing or creating a new relationship with your family, all of that, you get all of it. And so that's really powerful and something that you don't get when you're just working with me one-on-one, because I also have one-on-one coaching. And I just find that there's something really impactful in being held and witnessed in a very safe container where you really do feel like, wow, like she speaks for me. What she is describing right now is how I have felt. I just like never really said it that way or confronted it. Or now that she said it, I realized I've been feeling that way and I didn't realize it till she said it. And it's just the most healing thing to have that feeling of like, my sister speaks for me.
Definitely. And like just the feeling that we're not alone. And that, so I think having a safe space to share things that we've maybe never said out loud or never even said to ourselves.
Admit it out loud.
And still be loved and still be celebrated.
Yeah.
Have that. I think it like helps rewire our nervous systems.
Remove that shame.
Yeah.
Totally. That's the biggest thing is like, if we can shine light on that shame and alchemize it, like that's another huge piece of the alchemy, is to bring all of that stuff that we thought was too dark or too much in our shadow that we wanted to hide. Those are the places that are actually taking up the most amount of our energy and keeping us stuck in a place of contraction. Is all of that shame, all those secrets, all those things that we felt like I've never been told my husband or my partner or my friends, like nobody knows this about me. Like we have confessions, we have things that, you know, in some ways we're like, oh my gosh, you know me better than my best friend my entire life. And I would say in a lot of ways, my clients know me better than my friends that don't do my work because of the things that we all share and talk about. Right. And so it's such a beautiful space to have high achieving women who really are letting down their masks and finding that like we all are more similar than we are different. And we're all walking with pain, even if we're holding it and walking with it differently.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, and in that vein, the last thing I wanted to ask you about while we're here today, before we get into the fun stuff of like how people can find you and follow you and learn more, is feminine leadership is a big theme of my work and a big theme on the podcast this season. And so, you even alluded to it when you were first introducing yourself today in terms of like what drew you to your current career. So I'm curious, when you think about feminine leadership, what does that mean to you?
The first words that come out are like heart and soul led leadership. And also, if we could talk about skill sets, it would be valuing my intuition as much as my intellect. So as much as I'm analytical and I can describe, you know, why something makes sense, I also value, if not more importantly, my inner knowing, my intuition, my inner guidance. Similarly, like the creative process is just as important as like the data gathering process, right? So I think to me, there's in the world today, the paradigm we're even teaching men the importance of emotional intelligence and how to have good conversations with your direct reports so that people feel inspired and motivated versus top down told what to do like followers, right? Like even men are being taught how to lean more into these traditionally considered feminine qualities of leadership. And I think that because of the way society is designed, so many successful women have had to downplay or disconnect from these feminine qualities in order to be taken seriously and rise up in these more male-dominated industries. But now I'm seeing that like men are joining men's groups and talking about their emotions and realizing like, wow, there's this whole other half of being a human that they've been missing out on. And women, we get to reclaim that part that we've disowned because we were sort of taught and conditioned to believe that that part is less valuable. We got to double down on the part that makes us masculine. But now women get to actually lean back into their feminine essence and reclaim the parts of them that they used to disown and devalue, because now even men and women alike realize like that's actually the future of leadership.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I hope so. I'm so here for that.
Well, we're creating it. We're creating the new paradigm, and the old paradigm doesn't need to die for this new paradigm to rise.
Totally. And when I think about like so many of the changes that we need in the world right now, like I do so deeply believe that feminine leadership is like how we're going to get there.
Yes, heart and soul led leadership means that we would solve all of the problems on the planet so much faster. We put all the resources in all the right places. And there are so many brilliant women who just need to get over the, am I good enough? And who am I to think I could solve world hunger or whatever it is? It's like, we just need more women to get into their confidence because they actually have so many gifts and talents that once they unlock it and know that they are worthy of their dreams and the impact they're here to make, they're going to be unstoppable.
I just got the chills. I think it's so true. And then it's like, I think then the more too that we get to come together and do this collaboratively and not on our own, the faster it's going to happen as well.
Exactly. I think women are the most untapped resource on the planet.
Totally. Okay. Well, I mean, I have a million other things that I would love to ask you about, but I want to be respectful of your time. So, last question for people who are listening who want to find you, follow you, keep up with you, learn from you, like where's the best place for people to follow along?
Yeah. So on my Instagram, Victoria E Song, I'm always announcing like my new courses, the Bending Reality Love one that's coming out. And then now I have a really updated courses page. So if you go to www.victoriasong.me, /courses, you will find really every course that I have. And it's really exciting because for the first time ever, I'm really creating a whole range of access to me so that even for as little as like $111, you get something. And then you can also work with me at the high level one-on-one as well, if that's the investment you want to make.
Amazing. Well, and I know you very generously are also offering a free 7-day trial of the Bending Reality Club embodied for people who are listening. So if anyone wants to take you up on that, is that on the courses page as well?
Yes, so there's a 7-day free trial of my work because I'm just such a believer that you want to find what resonates with you. And I just want the right people to find my work. So to me, I'm like, hey, come in, binge watch it, see if it's for you. And that is on my courses page. It's called Bending Reality Embodied. And that's really the best step for anyone who's read my book or who knows that they just want to start entering into my world. That would be the first step to entering Bending Reality.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include that link as well as other links to find you and follow you in our show notes. But thank you so much, Victoria. I really, really, really appreciate your making time to come on the podcast. It's been so much fun to get to talk to you about all this stuff. I'm already feeling more expansive.
Good. Hopefully more conversations like this soon. Thank you for having me, Liz.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you're currently listening to it, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram at liz.best, that's lis.best, and you can find Girls Club Collective at girls_club_collective. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching for Liz Best, that's my name, LISBEST, and Girls Club Collective. Join our mail list by visiting the Girls Club Collective homepage and scrolling down to the bottom. You'll be in the loop on upcoming events, retreats, and opportunities to make magic with us, and you'll also receive a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch.